103.2 Preston FM.
Your community.
Your radio.
For Preston City Council. And I understand that the plans are to slash more than £3.6 million from Preston Council's budget over the next 3 years. And I know one of the statements that you had made is that people will soon start to notice a difference. Where will they notice the difference and how difficult? That is quite an amount of money. How on earth, leading the City Council, do you plan to be able to, continue with the services, etc.?
Yes, it is difficult, Hughie. I mean, it's much easier to cut that amount of money off a budget that we had, say, 3 years ago, but now the budget is so much less than it was because we've already had to cut it right back. It's proving much more difficult to find that 3.6 million. We do have 3 years to do it in, so it's going to take. So we're going to spread it over that time, but it does mean we're going to have to lose up to 80 posts. And yes, you're right. We've tried to protect frontline services. For example, where we're sharing services with Lancaster City Council, we're looking around to share other services with other councils. We're having talks, very encouraging talks with other councils to try and make savings that way, because that makes sense really, that if you've got a big IT provision that's costing, say, over £1 million a year, if you share it with a neighbouring authority, you can make really quite big savings. And members of the public quite rightly will say, well, get on with it. But it takes two to tango, and not always do you have your prospective partner as willing as you to go into partnership. So we're doing all we can to make savings that way, make more efficiencies. We're moving everybody and all our workforce into the town hall, which is going to be a squeeze from other offices around the city. Again, that's going to cost. That's going to save a lot of money. Where over the next few years we're going to be cutting back on management posts. But it still means there are going to be big savings that we're going to have to make on frontline services. We've got these wonderful parks in Preston.
Yes, we do.
That we've managed to bring in very big sums of external funding from Heritage Lottery. And, for example, Moor Park, we've recently heard that we're going to get quite a lot of money from the Heritage Lottery Fund for that park. But it does mean, because of our financial situation, we're looking everywhere, including the parks, to save really big sums of money. So to get back to your question, where will people notice? I think they'll notice particularly on littering. The council doesn't cause the litter, but the public expect us to pick up the litter. That is going to be increasingly difficult to do. We've already cut back a little bit on litter picking. We're going to be cutting back on litter picking within the suburbs this next year. Then the year after, we're really going to have to cut back on the city centre litter picking, and that I think people will notice quite considerably.
And particularly in the area of jobs, I mean, whenever there are mention of cutbacks, etc., I know for people who work within the various councils, that is always a very, very difficult time, because sometimes the media doesn't help with the sensationalising at times of where those posts are going to be cut. I mean, is voluntary redundancy something possibly the City Council will be looking at?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's a very difficult thing to do. Really, you've got to get it right, because obviously we want to consult our workforce early on before really we consult the public, because that's only fair that we say to our workforce, well, look, we're going out to consultation on these proposals. This is the way things are going. These posts are under threat, and of course it's very, very difficult. We will be, wherever possible, offering voluntary redundancy. We don't want to have compulsory redundancy. That is what we try. We have a council policy to avoid compulsory redundancy at all cost. That is last resort, really. But I think it's going to be impossible to avoid that. The situation is so serious.
And services, I know a statement that I read was probably cuts to number of home visits, revenue and benefit services, and to the opening hours of the contact centre and one-stop shop in Preston. So these are all the areas that the City Council need to look at when balancing the books. How do you feel we maintain the services when constantly, the cuts are being imposed on the council?
Well, as I say, we've been doing our best to protect frontline services, and the sort of things you've just mentioned may seem to perhaps members of the public to be fairly minor, but when taken as an accumulation, they add up to considerable sums. And many members of the public won't notice, for example, the cutbacks to the contact centre opening hours. If they go on the website, which we're encouraging people to do, really, make use of the website if you want to pay your council tax rather than coming into the contact centre. So it's things like that where we're trying to save money, but if people don't have computers, they don't know how to use them, they prefer the face-to-face, then they need to come into our contact centre. And it's really quite difficult then when we cut down on the hours and somebody wants to pop in on the way from work and we're shutting at 5 o'clock instead of 6.
Proposals when it comes to the council tax is expected to be an increase of around 2%.
Well, currently, yes, we're consulting on all our budget proposals, and that is the proposal to put the council tax up by 2%, which is up to the government's allowance, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
We're doing that because this is the rate of inflation, and it builds that extra 2% into our budget. It's regrettable, but faced with even worse cuts across the board, we think really we've got little alternative to doing this. Actually, can I say just how much it's going to cost, Hughie?
Yes.
Because our budget is really quite a small part of the overall council tax bill that will come through people's letterboxes. It'll only mean an extra 10p a week or £5 a year that people will be paying into Preston City coffers.
And I know one of the other areas that was being looked at, which I know sometimes from a public point of view certainly brings lots of discussion, are PCSOs. Are there any thoughts at the moment about our PCSOs here in Preston?
Well, we've discussed this with the police, and they say that crime is at a low level in Preston. Certainly, I know maybe people out there will say, well, there's a lot of antisocial behaviour going on, and PCSOs can be very helpful in terms of being available for those sorts of low-level criminal offences. It's unfortunate, but we just cannot afford to put money into PCSOs. We feel the police that is a function of the police authority when it comes to it. And I realise that they've got financial problems as well. I think it's worth saying at this point, Hughie, that local government has really been hammered by government since 2010. If central government departments have been cut as much as local government has, really this country wouldn't have a deficit problem.
Yeah.
The cuts have just been so unfairly applied to local government. And even within the local government scene, northern authorities, and I've made this point to you before, I think, northern authorities have been hit much worse than many authorities in the south of England.
And it must be difficult when you're trying to plan to maintain the services that we've just talked about, with not actually being able to see light at the end of that tunnel, because you then
bet.
don't know the
Yes.
next round of cuts, where they will come, and the financial implications for the city.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if government were able to say, right, this is going to be it for the next 3 years, that would be a fair way of doing it. But no, they don't do that. They say, this is it for 3 years, and then the next year they say, oh, by the way, here's another 10% that we're cutting off your grant. So it's very, very difficult to plan in those circumstances. Ed Miliband actually has just announced that if he is elected in the general election next year, that a Labour government will introduce 3 to 5 year budgets for local government. That makes a lot of sense, a lot more sense, because we can plan properly. Rather than having to wonder, well, what are they going to hit? What are they going to hit us with next?
That's an interesting point. So that would make quite a considerable difference, would it? The extra 2-year planning. At the moment, it's 3 years. But if you did have that 5-year, even though you had those cost implications, you were still aware of where the cuts or the costing of it was coming. That would help you plan better over a 5-year period.
Well, 5 years is certainly better than 3, but even if they let us alone for 3 years, rather than saying, here's 3 years, and then the next year saying, oh, by the way, I know we did say 3 years, but here's another 10% we're going to cut you by. And that is no exaggeration. That is what has happened to Preston Council.
Mm-hmm.
They've just cut us by another 10%.
Now, the proposals that we've talked about are subject to consultation, and I understand they will go to the full council meeting on February 27th.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And another thing that last time we met we were hoping to talk about, but we didn't have time, is I know when I talk to friends, and friends when they talk to me sometimes get... they're not too sure of the boundaries of Preston City Council and where the overlap is with our neighbours, particularly with Lancashire County Council. Sometimes there seems to be a misconception or a misunderstanding as to, particularly if you're living in Preston, the work of Preston City Council versus Lancashire County Council. Is that quite easy to explain?
I'm not sure. Because naturally enough, people in Preston, if something goes wrong, the council should do something about it, and they look to me and Preston City Council. Very often, it's not our responsibility. In the 1970s, Preston was what's called a county borough, and did have responsibility for education, social services, housing, as well as all the things it's got responsibility for now. But in that reorganisation, I think it was 1973, the county took on the big ticket items like education, social services, adult services, the residential care homes, things like that. They took a lot of they took a huge amount out of the responsibilities that Preston did have then. So, in fact, that's the situation we're in now, where Preston is what's called a lower tier authority, a second tier authority. We've got responsibility for emptying people's bins. We have the planning responsibility. We have environmental health. We have, of course, the leisure centres. We have the Guildhall. We have the Harris Art Gallery and Museum. but we don't have the roads. Highways Authority is the county council, and very often that's what people grumble about, quite rightly. The potholes in the roads, the lights not working on the streets, the holes in the pavements. That's the responsibility of the county council. And the council tax bill that comes through people's letterboxes, although it comes from Preston City Council, the element that goes to Preston City Council is actually only about 14%.
Right.
Which is really quite a small amount. The bulk of it goes to County Council. An element goes to the police, and an element goes to the Fire and Rescue Service. So that, in a nutshell, is what I call the mess in Preston. In Blackpool, Blackburn, those councils are unitary, and they have total responsibility. So when people blame the council or praise the council even, they're praising the one authority. In Preston, if people praise or complain and talk about the council, it might be Preston City has responsibility. More often than not, it's the county council has the responsibility. So in my view, it's not particularly. I don't think it's particularly democratic the way it works, because I think Preston should have complete responsibility for all its public services, really.
Right. And just talking about new homes, I mean, there's the proposal for the Garden City in I think, is it the northeast of the city that the proposals are for?
I think probably. Well, there is some housing in the northeast. The bulk of it is going to be going in the northwest.
The northwest.
City. And that is going to bring a huge influx of people living in the city, and it's going to be a real boon, I think, for the city centre and for retail. It's going to come over a number of years, of course, over the next 10 years. We've got a very big target to reach with our partners, the county council.
Yes.
And the reason that we haven't been able to build the houses that the government has expected us to build is because there hasn't been the infrastructure. And that really is the nature of the city deal agreement that we have with government to build the infrastructure, to build the roads, to build the garden cities, so that people have houses to live in.
Lovely. Well, can I thank you for coming into Preston FM once again this morning? It's been lovely to meet you.
It's a pleasure, Hughie. And just on our budget, if I really do welcome people.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
Giving their say about our budget. If they want to find out about it and find out more details about it, the budget is on our website, and they can make their comments, constructive comments, I hope. And tell us what they think, either by doing a little survey or just by giving their comments on the website. So it's quite easy, and it's remarkable, because every year we go through this process, and remarkably few people actually do comment. So it'd be really nice if this year people did perhaps spend a few minutes and go through that budget and see what sort of problems we've got, and perhaps give us some suggestions, useful suggestions of alternative courses of action, really.
And that's why, in a way, it's also nice to come onto radio and talk about it for our listeners who are listening, and it would be good if they participated and got involved. One question I did just want to ask, and we just mentioned it then. Any thoughts or proposals at the moment about the Guildhall? Because I know that, again, is something that's been discussed for quite a long time now.
Yes, it is indeed, and that brings me back to what I was saying earlier about when Preston was a county borough, it had responsibility for all its local affairs, including education and highways. And that's when it built the bus station, the Guildhall, two very big buildings. The Guildhall has always been a very expensive building to maintain and to operate, It's one of the biggest venues of its type in the Northwest. It's been problematic in the sense that these days it's not big enough to compete with, say, the O2 Arena in Manchester or any of the big arenas, but it's too big to be able to fill as much as we would like it to be filled with lots of people coming to events. So it's a problem for us. It actually costs us over $1 million a year, and that is a considerable sum of money. And we've set a target. We've got to take $500,000 out of that by next March. So we are actively pursuing quite encouraging lines of inquiry, people who are interested in taking the building over. So we'll just have to see how that goes. I hope perhaps in another month or 6 weeks we'll be able to announce something.
Brilliant. Peter, can I thank you for coming in this morning? It's been a pleasure to meet you once again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Hughie.
If you have any news or events you'd like to share with Hughie and our Chat City team, why not give us an email, chatcity@preston.fm.